Okay, so this is what a 21st century war looks like. It's slow. You focus on strangulation as opposed to a knockout punch. All right. So one way to understand what's happening is that the Americans have been doing this for a long time, but more subtly. All right. So in 2012, the Iranian president named Ahmadinejad, he accused the Americans of conducting weather warfare against Iran, mainly by creating droughts in Iran. And how do you do that? Well, it's cloud seeding, right? It's cloud seeding. So the idea of cloud seeding is that you shoot up a chemical called silver iodide into clouds, forcing it to rain. Okay? When you do that, well, the clouds dissipate the rain elsewhere and they don't go to Iran. Okay? So in 2019, there's a real fear that Iran would suffer from long-term drought. And regions like Dubai, which the Iranians claim to be the source of this weather warfare, they experience droughts. Floods. Okay? All right? So again, I don't know how the science works, and this is all rumors. But it does make sense where the Americans would use weather warfare against Iran, forcing rain to come down in Dubai to deny rain to the Iranians. Okay? There's a conspiracy theory that these world governments are conducting weather warfare using something called HAARP. Okay? Now, HAARP was originally designed in order to study the ionosphere, but some conspiracy theorists claim that HAARP can be used to create extreme weathers, including hurricanes, cyclones, flooding, droughts. I don't know, okay? I'm just pointing this out there. What we do know is that in 1962, Lyndon Johnson, who became president of the United States, he had a very famous quote at a speech. And he basically said, "He who controls the weather will control the world." Okay? The future of warfare is not about weapons, it's about weather. So it's not about how many weapons you make, it's about how well you can control the weather. Because if you think about it, if you can create a drought in a country, that country will be destroyed. Okay? And they put a lot of resources into developing weather warfare. And we know that from 1967 to 1972, the Americans created something called Operation Popeye. Okay, so this is during the Vietnam War. And what the Americans did was they seeded the clouds so that the monsoon season would be a lot longer in Vietnam. Well, why do that? Because then it's harder for the Vietnamese to resupply themselves. Okay? It makes it harder for them to fight because the Vietnamese are living in tunnels, right? Whereas the Americans are attacking from the air. All right? So this is pretty well known. Operation Popeye is something that the Americans did do in Vietnam, and they do have weather manipulation technology. The question is, the debate is, how effective this technology is, and how powerful is it, and how scalable is it, okay? Okay, that's the debate. We're already seeing elements of 21st century warfare being implemented around the world, okay? So look at Cuba. There's now an oil embargo on Cuba, and so there are blackouts. All right? So again, the intention is not to kill civilians, the intention is not to fight a war, the intention is to economically strangle a nation so that eventually the population wants to overthrow the government. And already what we're seeing is, these past few months, lots of accidents around the world that's destroying the world's oil supply. Okay? But there's one region of the world that doesn't really care about the loss of refineries, the loss of oil supply, and that's North America. Because North America is extremely wealthy. And so if the rest of the world is facing energy scarcity and food scarcity, it's going to have to beg North America, the United States, Canada, Mexico for resources. And this allows the Americans to better control the world. Okay? Again, this is what 21st century warfare looks like. All right. Another thing that I will point out is that the Americans are very good at overthrowing governments. Okay? There's something called the Color Revolution Playbook. Color Revolution Playbook. And so what the Americans do is they basically invite young people from different nations to come to America to learn about democracy and to learn about how to organize protest movements, how to overthrow the government in order to promote democracy. The Americans will also finance NGOs in different countries in order to create young movements in the world. The Americans will also control social media in order to galvanize the population and foment unrest. Okay, and we saw this play out most recently in last year in Nepal, when young people overthrew the government. Now, guys, okay, here's the thing. In Nepal, most people don't speak English. They don't read English. So why are these young people holding up signs? Okay, boomer, time's up. Okay? That's in English. Who's it for? Also, okay, boomer, it's an American phrase. Okay? It's an American phrase, not a Nepalese phrase. So, in other words, they're doing this not to have impact locally in Nepal. They're doing this because someone's paying them to do this. You understand? It's being funded by Washington. And Washington's like, okay, well, I'll pay you this amount of money if you give me a slogan, if you hold a slogan, so that I can show my boss that this protest is working. Also, guys, here's another sign. We pay you flex enough, okay? Another English sign. So again, why are they doing this when the local population don't even speak English? They're doing it for Washington. They're not doing it for their own country. They're doing it for their masters in Washington. All right, does that make sense? All right, and this is very common in the world today, where these protests are being orchestrated by Washington for Washington, as opposed to being organic. This goes back in 2010, 2012, you have these Arab Spring protests happen all around the Middle East, okay? To destabilize these governments in the Middle East, and we know that social media, basically Twitter and Facebook, were instrumental in organizing people and promoting unrest in these places. All right? So these are all called color revolutions, or the color revolution playbook. So not only does America have the capacity to strangle a nation's economy and force the population to beg for mercy, Washington, the Americans also have strategies on how to overthrow the government using the local population. Okay? Basically by controlling social media, by organizing young people, paying them to protest, and bribing security services to not intervene. Okay? It's a very successful playbook. They've tried many times, and it's worked many times before. All right. So, America can use this playbook against every country that opposes it, okay? So the main reason, again, is because America controls the world's choke points, including Strait of Malacca, Panama Canal, Gibraltar. These are the major choke points. Even though the Iranians control the Strait of Hormuz, the Americans can have aircraft carriers in the Indian Ocean and blockade the Iranians. Okay? This is important because a lot of people believe that what America really wants to do is just destroy China. And unfortunately right now, a lot of the Chinese economy depends on exports, meaning trade. If you can't export, your economy can suffer a great deal. When your economy suffers a great deal, you lose GDP, you have unemployment, and it's possible that you have protests happening in China. because of the collapse of the economy. Okay? So that is what a 21st century war looks like. Okay? You don't send troops, you don't destroy. What you do is you strangle a people to death and force the people to rise up against the nation state.